Okay, folks, good afternoon, and good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, everyone. School teacher, okay, yeah. Welcome to another one of our TESS seminars, and TESS, of course, is our Center for Tropical, Environmental, and Sustainability Science here at JCU. We're very happy with our TESS seminar program. We're often getting at least as many, sometimes twice as many or 3 times as many people following online. And we also have been getting thousands of people, this is quite amazing, thousands of people looking at these talks on YouTube. So our YouTube channel has really taken off. So we're really pleased about that. It helps our impact in so many different ways. It's a real pleasure today to introduce Anne Sheppard. Anne is the president of the FNQ Volunteers group. And let me just say, my PhD study, I ended up using over 60 volunteers that we recruited out of local youth hostels here in Cairns. And we would never have gotten that project finished if it wouldn't have been for the efforts of all those amazing volunteers. They were just such good people, so important to the effort. And Annette is very engaged in this kind of work. She's been very heavily invested in far north Queensland in a lot of different capacities. For instance, she's been a teacher, she's been a nurse, she's been a counselor in Mulgrave Shire Council and Cairns City Council. She's done a lot of different things in many different capacities, and she's now working into this into these efforts of so-called transformational volunteering, which they're working on here in this area. So without further ado, Anne, we'll turn things over to you, and thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm not used to standing behind a desk like this and delivering. I'm used to standing out there, walking around and having a bit of interactivity, but I'll do my best. Thank you so much for having me here and for inviting me. I do appreciate it. We embarked on this project maybe 6 months or so ago. Could be longer than that, actually. And I've been asked to deliver the outcomes, the process, and so forth. So we'll get on with that. Oh, I'm going to... Yep, okay. Firstly, I'd like to do the acknowledgement of country. We have much to learn from our First Nations people and respect and honour the traditional custodians of the land upon which we work and live, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We respect the First Peoples, who are the Barma, the Aboriginal Rainforest people, who are the traditional custodians of the land that cover our region. We also acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who call our region home and the country from which they came. So the project team was made up of myself, our treasurer, Jen Fry, who is a graduate from James Cook University. She did all of the IT, so she was taught well. And I'd like to introduce Marty Jennings. Marty came to us and she wanted to volunteer. The volunteer interviewer realised that she had some skills that I actually wanted. So she came in and we had a chat and we soon found a place for her. So her business studies have come in really handy. So we're a place-based volunteer resource centre. We're established in 1999, so we've been around for a long time. We're a not-for-profit, community-based organisation, largely run by a volunteer workforce. Recruitment and placement of volunteers into jobs that are best fit for the individual and the organisation they are referred to. That's our primary business, is the recruitment of volunteers and the placement of them into volunteer jobs. We support other volunteer involving organisations to build capacity and engage with volunteers in meaningful ways to increase volunteer participation and to encourage people to embrace volunteering as a lifestyle choice. How many of you are involved with volunteering? Quite a lot. So we're in a group here that actually does understand what volunteering is all about, which is really great, because we've had a diminishing number of volunteers, and that's why it's so really important now we've been involved with the state government with the inquiry into volunteering. We've made a number of submissions, and when they did the hearing here, they actually came and visited our office, which was really useful. And they are particularly interested in how we can better support the volunteering sector. So I'm still engaged with them, and they asked me, how would we design volunteer hubs that support volunteering and volunteer involving organisations? And also, because there's been such a diminishing number of volunteers post-COVID, how can we actually look at engaging more with people to encourage them to volunteer? So that's a work in progress. So this project was designed to enable organisations to increase their knowledge of both the standards and the strategy, and to upskill their volunteer managers too. The Volunteering Australia have released standards for volunteer involving organisations in the management of volunteers and engagement with volunteers. So essentially we were endeavouring to introduce them to the standards if they weren't already familiar with them, and also to see how we can better implement the standards to improve the volunteering sector. So we want them to build resilience within the organisations to meet the needs of their volunteer cohort, build management capacity through relevant strategies and policy development, build governance through alignment with the standards and the strategy. And the desired outcomes included increase the understanding and application of the standards and strategy, increase the capacity of organisations to engage with and to retain volunteers, an increased understanding of the needs of the volunteer cohort and how to better meet those needs, the ability to build into the organisation's activities and provide a pathway to employment for volunteers. That's an important part of what we do, because we've found that a lot of people come into the volunteering space because they can't get work. And what we do is we offer them experience and we offer them a pathway into paid employment. And we always celebrate it when we lose a volunteer into the paid workforce, because we know that it's been successful. So offer experiences that provide greater social and cultural engagement, foster resilience and well-being for volunteers whose capacity for paid work is limited. So we have a certain amount of demand from the disability sector, from people who are supported through the NDIS and so forth. It's sometimes really difficult to place those people into volunteer roles because of the supports that they need. So that again is a work in progress as well. We have to do better in that space. Okay, so the preparatory work involved obviously a literature review, which I guess you're all familiar with. And I've got those lists, I won't go into naming them all there. And also we looked at the theoretical frameworks for leadership within organisations. So we designed a 4-part questionnaire and developed it to determine the support needs of the VIOs, the extent to which they comply with the standards, and a feedback suggestion section. I've got all of these resources that we've developed, and if anybody is interested in them and wants copies, I'm quite happy to share them with you. So you'll have to leave your contact details, emails and so forth, so that if you want that, I can do it. Microsoft Excel was the platform that we used. Do we call it a platform? I guess we do. And allowed for the proposed results extraction technique that was developed by Jen. The team received a 20% return rate from participants dispersed across the cross-section of the volunteer involving organisations. We were less than happy with the 20% return, but we were happy that we got it. The survey gleaned information relating to support, training and resource needs, governance and organisational policies and procedures, and the interface with the standards and anecdotal experiences, feedback and suggestions. So that's just a look at the survey that we sent out. But as I say, I've got a copy of that if anybody wants it, you're quite welcome. The project team explored the idea of transformational leadership and transformative organisations. A PowerPoint presentation workshop exercise worksheets were developed, emphasising the qualitative rather than quantitative factors underpinning the motivation towards involvement in volunteer and engagement with volunteers. Unfortunately, for most organisations, the funding requirements mean that we have to do quantitative reports, and the qualitative is so much overlooked. How do you actually quantify the benefits that people get from volunteering on that personal intrinsic level? Good question, but we're trying to do that. We're feeding back to government because these reports and the work that we've done actually feeds back into the Department of Social Services. The purpose of this approach was a soft glove methodology to engage participants with the notion of how we behave intrinsically rather than adherence to rules and regulations for our behaviour. The team endeavoured to engage more deeply with participants on a profound level of understanding of the motivation behind volunteering and its application and the intent of the standards. So, workshop 1 resources, we gave everybody a USB with information about the literature review. So they had all of that at their fingertips. We also included the PowerPoint presentations and the worksheet. The PowerPoint content was informed by the survey results. So it was a building exercise. Everything that we do was designed to build towards the next step. Participants recorded their comments through thoughts and ideas in the worksheets, which were returned for collation. And the workshop was interactive with prompt questions and time for participants to debate issues and share their experiences and responses with the group. 4-hour long break workshop with breaks for morning tea and lunch. PowerPoint presentation focused on transformational volunteering and transactional volunteering, transformational leadership and transactional leadership, transformational organisations and transactional organisations. They looked at participatory action and the dimensions of participatory action. Building social capital and social inclusion and social cohesion, and barriers to volunteering. Feedback from workshop 1 was collated and discussed, informing the content for workshop 2. The overall approach again was qualitative. PowerPoint presentation and exercise worksheets were developed building on the ideas and the comments from the survey and the first workshop. Participants recorded their comments, thoughts and ideas in the worksheets, which were returned for collation. The collated results inform the project report, which is to be sent out to all of the participants, as well as the funding body. The workshop was interactive, prompt questions and so forth. So we followed through with the same basic process throughout. So, focused on the following points: the 8 standards, best practice, flexibility and diversity, governance and management, policies and procedures, roles and responsibilities, building social capital, volunteer interaction, attitudes, attributes, and leadership, transformative practice, and transformational leadership. Again, collated, discussed, etc. Everything was merged, and we explored that information to form our conclusions and recommendations from the project. So, conclusions. The most common issue for volunteer involving organisations relates to the capacity of organisations to respond to their constituency. Same across organisations. They all were saying, we don't have capacity. In other words, they're not funded sufficiently. They don't have enough volunteers with the skills that they need, and so forth. So there's a lot of commonality across organisations when it comes to the volunteer workforce. There are limited funding opportunities, volunteer recruitment, training and retention. Time poor, limited people resources to do limitless work was one of the comments. High demand with limited resources to respond. Stifled growth due to limited resources and funds. So the ability of organisations to do what they want to do is limited by the situations that they find themselves in. The overheads, including insurance, drain the existing resources. Volunteer involving organisations. Our organisation, we recruit and place volunteers with other organisations. However, just because they're a member doesn't mean that we'll place volunteers with them. They must have the relevant volunteer insurance, because it's so important that the volunteers are covered by workplace insurance in the same way as if they worked in the paid workforce. And that is really critical, but that of course is a big drain. Our insurances are upwards of between $4,000 and $5,000 a year to cover our volunteers and the various other things that we need to insure. So organisations identified training in a range of areas, particularly governance-related issues, as critical for capacity building. Whilst most organisations were familiar with the standards, they are not generally referred to on a regular basis. The participants found it difficult to navigate the Volunteering Australia website to find support, information and resources. The Volunteering Australia website has got a lot of really, really useful information for volunteers and for the volunteer involving organisations. However, time and again, the complaint that has been made to us is that it's not that easy to interact with. Networking was identified as important for organisations to share experiences, ideas and encouragement, and an opportunity for the development of a strong volunteer sector. Support for a dedicated hub centre to provide support to VIOs in training and general support for VIOs in the recruitment of volunteers was a common theme. So, our recommendations were to develop issue-specific workshops to deliver training to VIOs that are critical to capacity building and skills development. So these are some of the suggestions that were made by participants as to the sorts of workshops that they needed to enable them to better do their business. We recommended that we hold regular networking events to nurture development of a strong VIO sector, sharing experiences, ideas, encouragement, support and training. That we continue to deliver the national standards for volunteering workshops to existing VIOs and targeting newly emerging organisations utilising the existing resources developed in the program. We need to provide a more effective search tool for volunteer associations who are seeking resources on the national standards for the volunteering website. So, So the outcomes, recommendations and the processes that we used. What I've done here is include some of the slides that we used during the presentation. So they're a bit higgledy-piggledy and haphazard, but it'll give you an idea of the sort of approach that we used. So volunteer involvement is a two-way relationship. It provides volunteers with an opportunity to contribute to the social, economic and community outcomes. And it enables organisations and groups to achieve their goals, visions and purpose. So essentially it's a two-way street, interactive. So look at social participation, access, connection, fairness and equity, social relations, building social networks, trusting in others and acceptance of diversity, and social cohesion, the focus on the common good, solidarity and helpfulness, civil participation, respect for social rules. Volunteering is the glue that binds. It's about community, collective reciprocity, sharing and caring, and interdependence. So transactional versus transformational. So with transactional, now it's not saying that transactional is wrong and transformational is right. We need both, and both are part of a healthy organisation. However, we need to understand the difference in what we're doing and try to balance that within our organisations so that we've got that right balance of doing what we need to do and inspiring people. So transactional is about exchange. We've all heard about transactional with our recent international politics, transactional politics, but we're talking about transactional volunteering, not quite the same. So it's about what can I achieve? It's limiting because it doesn't reach out and spread. It's narrowing and it's inward looking. It's exclusive and it's task oriented. Whereas transformational is about change. It's about what can we do. It's liberating, it's expanding, expansive and explorative. It's outward looking, it's inclusive, and it's outcomes oriented. So there is a substantive difference between the two, but both are really critical to a successful organisation. So transactional leadership focuses on short-term goals, bargaining and performance, taking the form of a task-oriented transaction. Transformational, on the other hand, focuses on leadership, clear vision, collective benefits, and long-term value. Transformational leadership is a style that inspires and motivates followers to achieve exceptional results by focusing on their needs, their development, and their potential, ultimately transforming them and the organisation. So transactional, again, is about exchange. It's about the business. It's about governance. It's about rules and regulations. It's about policies and procedures, red tape, getting the job done, ticking boxes and getting it right. Organisations can get bogged down in the transactional side of their business, and it can overtake the transformational side. We have to be really careful to get that balance. So transactional is about what are our obligations. It's about the things we need to do. Strong foundations for transformation, building the scaffolding for a transformational organisation. So we've got to get that side of it right in order to be transformational. So you can see how the two work together. So be the change you want in your community. Transformation, what brings transformation? So it's about interaction. Affirmative, encouraging, supportive, accepting, appreciative, reciprocal, and respectful. We all hear these words said time and again. They should be the underpinning virtues. Not necessarily that easy to achieve all the time. Your attributes: helpful, compassionate, motivated, dedicated, reflective, impactful, and useful. And attitudes: caring, empathetic, altruistic, enthusiastic, responsive, and the importance of what you're doing, the people around you. You need to acknowledge that these things are really important. What I'm doing is important. Transformational leadership is about interaction, how we work with each other. Attitudes and attributes, how we behave with each other. Leadership is about how we take responsibility. Participation is how we contribute. And social capital, obviously, is how we build relationships. Transformative practice empowers people to accomplish positive change through vision, inspiration, and action. It's not limited to those in charge. We think that we need a leader. However, we can all be leaders. Leaders take responsibility. Leadership is not limited just to those in charge. In a way, it's a cop-out for us as individuals if we just look to the leadership and say they're the ones that are responsible. In organisations, we're all responsible. So transformative practice is a process of personal growth and development that empowers ourselves and others to be the best versions of ourselves and of others. Find your vibe, find your tribe. Participation is about taking part, joining in, and being part of. Participatory action is about engagement, involvement, connection, accessibility, equitable, supportive, and fair. Participatory action requires working in partnership with your volunteers, embracing opportunities to evolve and grow, strengthening capacity to respond to perceived threats. Success is determined by impact, not activity measures. So again, we're looking qualitatively. It's really the qualitative stuff that drives volunteering. It's not about quantitative measures. Volunteers generally are not interested in the quantitative factors surrounding what they do. They're interested in the qualitative factors. We build social capital. There's a lot said about social capital. At the inquiry, when I appeared at the inquiry and I've had discussions with them, they've talked about things that actually amount to the building of social capital. It's about community, it's about networks, relationships, social connection, common goals and culture. It's about collaboration, partnerships, building community, celebrating success. Volunteer recognition is really important. You can burn your volunteers out. Volunteers need to be recognised for what they do. A simple thank you goes a long, long way. Acknowledgement. Belongingness, diversity, celebrates differences, validation, events, training, growth and development, quality of life. All of those things amount to the social capital that we're building out of our volunteer activities. Volunteering is embedded in leadership, governance, and culture. So these are just an overview of the standards. They're the 8 standards. Participation is championed and modelled. Volunteer roles are meaningful and tailored. Recruitment is equitable and diversity is valued. Volunteers are supported and developed. Volunteer safety and wellbeing is protected. Volunteers are recognised. And volunteer policies and practices are continuously improved. We've never got it 100% right, have we? No matter what we do in an organisation, it's never 100% right. There's always room for improvement. People come up with new ideas, better ways of doing things. Listen. Thank you. Volunteering is still the best job in town.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Annette. My name's Susan Lawrence. So you talked about how lack of resources is a common problem.
I'm the family head.
Oh, okay.
Mum is going to tell me.
All right. You mentioned how being under-resourced is a huge problem. Do you think that's more of a problem in regional towns compared to big cities? And do you get funding from local government?
So the resources, do you think being under-resourced is more of a problem in a regional town than in the cities?
And do we get funding from Cairns City Council?
Yeah. That is a really interesting question. And at the volunteer inquiry,
Sorry. Yeah.
It's a really interesting question. At the volunteering inquiry, it was very much on their mind. So, yes, in regional areas, we have less resources than they have in the metropolitan areas. By virtue of population, I guess, but also remoteness. And also, for our organisation, funding decreased until we got to a point we used to service, we could physically go to Cooktown, Laura, places like that, up the Tableland, Cassowary Coast and so forth. We seldom do that anymore because we just simply we're not resourced to do it.
So where are you getting your funding from? Who's funding it?
We've got 2 pockets of funding at the moment. Both of them come from the Commonwealth. One is for the Volunteer Management Activity Program, for which we get $50,000 a year, it's reduced to less than a third of what we were receiving 5 years ago. But we're expected to deliver similar outcomes to what we have always been doing.
Other questions? I had one question, Annette. You said that the volunteering dropped off a lot after COVID, and I was curious as to why that was. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We've all been really curious about that. Part of the reason is that a majority of our long-term volunteers and volunteers who have stuck, we've given awards out for people that have been volunteering in the same organisation for 40 years.
Wow.
25 years, 15 years. That's not happening anymore. COVID, I think, provided a reason for a lot of those ageing volunteers to continue in their volunteer roles. It was time out. Everybody took time out. So they just simply didn't return. And also, we find that it is an ageing population. The most reliable volunteers we've found are those 45 plus mark. A lot of them are people who are on benefits and are required to do mutual obligation. That's a bit of a cop-out, this idea of mutual obligation, because volunteering and obligation don't go together. Volunteering is something that you do because you want to do it, whereas mutual obligation, you have an obligation. However, there are a lot of older people who can't get work and they find it difficult. So they actually come into volunteering to keep themselves alive, to keep the spark there.
Right.
And we're really grateful for that. It's the downturn in numbers has been in the younger sector, and we find that pressures of work, pressures of family, earning a living, all of those sorts of things seem to have magnified post-COVID. So we're not getting, and families, let's face it, parents or the partners are in 2 jobs.
Yeah.
So, you know, everybody's scratching for time.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions? Any questions online? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, without further ado, Annette, thank you very much for coming and sharing all that with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Very much for having me.